Awesome.
So we're joined all the way from beautiful Northern California, there in the San Francisco Bay Area, by my friend, licensed financial planner, financial expert, Tonza Christian. We thank you so much for taking some time to be with us today. This is our personal finance class here at Belma Jackson High School, and we're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County Schools, Madison Central, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for getting up early out there in California and joining us today.
Thank you so very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Now, before we talk about all your financial things, because we know you have so much to go over, just give us a little bit of background because you're actually from Mississippi,
I
and
am.
you did not go to school to be a financial person. So tell us about that timeline and the pivot you made once you did that, because I know it, but they haven't heard it. I love this story.
Awesome, awesome. Yes, no worries. Well, again, Greg, thank you so much for having me. It's always an honor and a privilege to be able to give back. And you are absolutely correct. I did not go to school for finances. So, brief history about me: born and raised very, very small towns called French Camp, Mississippi, which is where I was born and raised. Family is still there. I went to French Camp Academy, and I went to my goal was to be a nurse. So I started out, I went to Meridian Community College, got my associate's degree there, and followed up with Capella, get my master's in business as well as master's in healthcare administration. And I graduated nursing school in 2004. So it's been officially 20 years. So after 20 years, after 15 years in that career, I found myself personally wanting to do more, but really not having the foundational education to be able to do that. So I moved from Mississippi to California in 2008, just like many individuals searching a higher paycheck. So I got that, but just because you make more money doesn't mean you know exactly what to do with it. So I have to search out answers for myself. Many of us come from homes just like me. My mom was a single mom, fifth grade level of education. She had to drop out of school to help support the younger ones. So that's kind of, it's the story. So I'm very blessed and very grateful to this opportunity to be able to give back. And in the last 5 years, along with my amazing husband and myself, we've been full-time in entrepreneurship, traveling all over the world, educating individuals about finances. So,
Yeah, and I think that's so cool. And and I say all the time, I'm not even a financial expert. I have this class, but that's why I depend on great experts like you to speak about things. But even when we don't have people like you, it's just basic things that kids need to realize now. So, 15, 16 year olds might say, "Oh, this stuff is stupid. It's never going to apply to me." But then they say, "Well, I don't want to go to college. I want to start working," and they're completely lost. So
exactly.
and one thing, I have a few things I want to hit on, but one thing I always cringe when I see on Instagram, I see these memes about they need to lower the retirement age. They need to make it where we can retire at 40. And I'm like, well, retirement doesn't have anything to do with age. It has to do with money saved. So
Yeah.
little things like what an employer matches in a retirement account, putting in that full amount. I'm not even an expert, and I know if you don't at least do that, you're absolutely out of your mind. So talk about retirement saving and how they can start doing that from a very young age.
Sure, sure. You're absolutely right. The thing is that whether you go to school, whether because college honestly is not for everybody. However, we are in the money game, and if we're playing the money game, but most of us don't know the rules of the game to be able to maximize what's out there and available to us. So retirement is something very, very important. None of us we love what we do, but let's be honest, nobody wants to do it forever. So even if you go to college or start out understanding your basic 401ks, meaning the match. Well, what does that mean? Well, right now the levels are if you're less than 50, the maximum amount the IRS allows you to put in is 19,005 a year. And if you're over 50, you can put up to 22,005. So even if your company is matching you, you should at least be putting in the match. Greg, what I always say is this. In this country, we do not have a money making problem. We have a savings problem. It's that we have time to do it later. Oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it later. But when you get to, your early 20s, if you're young, and I want you guys to listen to me, especially students, when you're young, you don't need to have a lot of money. But the older you get, you have less time. So you're going to have a lot of money to put aside. So start early, putting aside, saving something. I know we hear about the rainy day. It's coming. And the rainy day is age, right? So retirement is very, 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 very important. That's the rainy day is age. So it's very important that you not only go to your open, we're getting ready to approach open enrollment, which is November, right? Open enrollment, students have a conversation with your parents. They're signing up for the benefits. Ask them, how do you know what to elect? How do you know this? So then you're going to one day be in a position to have to enroll in your benefits, select your, tax deductions and all of these different things. You need to know how to do that because it's very important that you get those basics early.
Yeah, and then also when you have these deductions, and we'll talk about deductions in this class later, but you honestly don't even miss that money because I put in the max amount of retirement match, and I also put in a little bit on deferred compensation to have a little bit more once I retire. Now, it may not be a whole lot right now, but that money accrues interest over time. And even me being just an idiot, at least I know that that money is going to be there later when I need it.
Exactly. Exactly. And that is so important is that you have time on your side. When it comes to growing your money, you may look at, oh, this little $100 a month is not going to do anything, or $200 a month is not going to do anything. It will over time. I know we look at wealth and there's so many individuals out there that we, especially, as students, you look at them and think, oh my God, they have it all together. But if you really do a deep dive into the bio and look at where they started, they all did nobody start there. Even when it comes to the stock market, wealthy people did not start in the stock market. Now, granted, that's where they end up, but they don't start there. So basic things like maxing out your 401k, saving your money, putting aside, at least learning how to live off 50% of what you make. Those things are so important. Simple interest, compounding interest, but we'll get into that a little bit later, but it's very, very important.
Absolutely. Now, and another thing, especially in the rural communities that I've noticed over the last few years, and I know a lot of people like yourself have put out the hashtag no more GoFundMe funerals.
Yes.
And life insurance, I think, was misunderstood as a scam by a lot of people, especially in rural Mississippi and other rural states. But, it's so sad. It's sad enough when you have a tragic loss that someone has lost a loved one, but it's even more sad when people were not aware or were naive about life insurance. So,
Yeah.
talk about why that's so important. Because when you get life insurance at 18 years old, you're not going to be paying a whole lot for it, and that's going to stay with you forever. So talk about why it's so important, especially if it's provided through an employer, to look at life insurance, especially for people that want to start a family.
Absolutely. So, so important. So, talking about rural Mississippi, growing up in French Camp, my grandmother, one of the things she would always do, and maybe some of you can relate, my grandmother, on the first of every month, she would put a little brown envelope outside her door for the insurance man to come by and pick it up. One thing that she believed in is she believed in getting insurances on everybody. And she didn't necessarily trust the banks. I would watch her sometime put money underneath a mattress because she just wanted to make sure she could get her hands on it. So, watching her do that and understanding that generation of individuals believed in life insurance. We, however, don't necessarily and have not taken on that. So, when life happens, it's kind of like, the old saying, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. The truth of the matter is having life insurance is the basic foundation of creating and building financial security and wealth. If you are, as an example, if you're once you graduate and you start your family, the average cost for a 4-year college right now, somewhere, depending upon where you go, but it can be up into the hundreds of thousands. And let's say you have a home, and when you get a home, your home is 300,000. But now you have your employer. Your employer is going to give you basic life insurance when you're doing those enrollments. When you're sitting down for your benefit packet, sign up for them. Sign up for those basic life insurance for your employee that your employer offers because it's free. Now, granted, if you want to get $1 million, $2 million or something like that, most of the time employers require you to do medicals, but take advantage of what is free so that you can transfer the liability of your income. You can transfer the liability of you over to an insurance company. But life insurance is the basic fundamentals of creating and building wealth. Right now, nobody has access to be able to give to GoFundMe. We don't have it. So the burden and the responsibility is for us to be able to protect ourselves. So life insurance is so, so important. And it's so affordable. Like you mentioned, when my son was in high school, he's now 25, but he was in high school. He was, wrestling, and one of the students there end up getting injured and having paralyzed from the neck down. I was like, oh my goodness. The realization set in for me. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't have anything on my son. So that is when I first got into the insurance space, first got into the financial space, Greg. And I went out and I got him a $500,000 policy for $16 a month. You're
Wow.
talking almost 170 something dollars is what we pay for the year. We pay that for shoes. We pay shoes $170. So it's so important to get it while you're young and you'll have it for the rest of your life.
Absolutely, and it's just you know, you see a lot of the people like yourself that post about this, and you know, and it really is. It's so sad when a community loses someone suddenly, but then it's even sadder when the community takes on the financial burden of trying to have that person's final wishes taken care of, and it is something that could have been avoided. And again, a lot of it was lack of access, lack of resources, but times have changed and access has changed as well.
Very true. I mean, you can get a quote. I mean, there's so many individuals that are on social media right now. And where do we spend most of our time? Social media. You can get free quotes in like 5 minutes. You can just say your name, date of birth, your name, date of birth, smoker, non-smoker. You can get a quote in like 2 seconds. It's so easy. So it's in a lot of these insurance providers and carriers does not even require medicals. So it's so easy to qualify. And on top of that, getting a quote, submitting an app for most life insurance policies, Greg, you don't even have to submit it with any money. So if it costs nothing and if it doesn't cost you anything and it's something you need, why not look into it? So definitely look into that. The basic foundation of 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 financial freedom.
Absolutely. Now we're going to come back to this to that social media point you just made, but you mentioned something a second ago that I think is so important because you talked about people of certain generations in rural areas did not trust banks. And
Yeah.
look, I use Cash App. I use Venmo for its uses. It definitely has its place. But having a Cash App card is not having a bank account. It is so important to start getting relationships with banks for checking and savings accounts right now because I have kids all the time say, look, I want to buy a house. I want to have a family. You're going to have some type of bank statements in order to be able to do that. You're going to have to prove income to get a loan. If you want to have a credit score, you're going to have some type of FDIC insured bank account. So, what are some things as far as that goes? Because these apps really push on the young people. And look, I just said, like I said myself, I use them. They have their place, but that's not what I'm using. That's not where my paycheck is being deposited to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I didn't even realize up until recently, Greg, that these Cash App actually have a bank card attached to them with actual a routing and account number. But please don't get those things confused. It is not the same things as going to, Regions Bank and setting up US Bank and setting up a bank account. You want to give yourself the best footing to be able to qualify for things that you're going to need. You're going to need a place to stay. You're going to need shelter. You're going to need, a credit history and established credit history. The banks needs to know before they lend you hundreds and thousands of dollars on your home purchase that you can manage a basic deposit. Do you know what to do with a deposit when your checks are direct deposit? They need to know that they can trust you with this hundreds and thousands of dollars that you want for your home. And having these things, it is convenience, but understand convenience does not always equate to stability. The banks are insured by FDIC, which stands for Federal Depository Insurance Commissioner. They are insured. So they're not lending and loaning money out to anybody that they cannot trust with. That's why they require so many documentations, like you mentioned, your bank statement, your W-2s, and they don't ask just for your bank statement. They want like the last year or 6 months. What if you don't have that to prove? Give yourself the best possibility to be able to qualify for things that you're going to need later on. Understanding again, convenience does not equate to stability. So that's very, very important. Yep, I use them too. I use Cash App, I use Apple Pay, I use all of those things, but you need a bank account. Go and get it set up. And a lot of these bank accounts are there for students. They're free. They're free. So they're free. So take advantage of that. Take advantage of that.
Yeah, just here in the Jackson area, Trustmart, Regions, Bank Plus all have student checking and Cadence Bank. It used to be Bank Core South back in your day. I just aged you there. I'm sorry. But but Cadence Bank as well all have student accounts, and you're right. They can start it for free, and and they know that these kids are working at these employers that are going to these places that are going to be putting money into there, there's not going to be any issue getting your money. So I would strongly suggest, especially these 16-year-olds about to start working, get those accounts now to start having that history.
Yes. Just as excited you are about working and getting your paycheck. And I think you should work because that's going to teach you how to budget your money. It's different when you can walk into a store and say, okay, mommy, I want. But when you have your own bank account and you're seeing this money dwindling down, all of a sudden it becomes real to you. So definitely take advantage of those student checkings account at your local banks. It's so important.
Sorry, we had the intercom going off. Now, you just mentioned something about social media, and obviously we were growing up in a time where that was not the case.
Yeah.
And look, I follow celebrities on social media. There's athletes I love to see and everything. But I always say, just because somebody's balling out on social media doesn't mean they're rich. Famous does not equal rich. And I think that is one of the biggest misnomers that society has. These
Yeah.
rappers that we see throwing up dollar bills, that a lot of it's prop money, and then a lot of it was advances, and they're just blowing it. So I
Yep.
always, find people like yourself, Anthony O'Neill, some of these young financial experts to put positive things into your life, to teach you how to budget. Look, I understand it's not their grandparents' fault that they were never taught these things. I was never taught these things in school. The kids don't believe me. I went to Madison Central High School, graduated in 2000. We never had somebody sit down and talk about these things. Nobody even told us how to get a mortgage loan. We were told everybody gets student loans, and that's
Yeah.
just that's a huge mistake. So, what are some ways that these kids can start learning to budget and spend wisely now? Because social media has taken over on I have to have it right now mentality.
Yeah. I've sat down and I'm blessed to have the opportunity to sit down with many celebrities, many of them. And I wish that, you could hear their stories. And just again, everybody has their own lane as far as their level of expertise, but when they're out here doing their jobs, because we think it's entertainment, but that's their job. But when it comes down to sitting down and actually having people in your corner that actually have your back. Let me give you an example. So I know we look at a lot of individuals, like you said, as far as the lifestyle on social media, and that's okay. But understanding that they didn't acquire that overnight, that they had to put the work in to do it. So with the images, and just a few examples, and we don't really know the magnitude of what they didn't have in place, unfortunately, until they pass away. And examples of individuals who left a financial ruin for their families afterwards, or celebrities, Prince, Aretha Franklin, Michael Jackson, even the individual who just Atlanta, gosh, I think it's remember the rapper. So these are individuals we look up to, assuming that they have it all together, but they're trusting that their finance person is managing their finances. Listen to me. Even when I started nursing at the age of 21, I got a financial advisor, but I also was interested in not just trusting this financial advisor with all of the information. So I was hungry for the knowledge myself. So I began reading books and looking up things and not just watching things on social media. Thank God, Greg, we didn't have social media back in my days.
Tell me about it. We'd have been in a lot of trouble.
I'm so glad we didn't. So glad we didn't. But again, understanding it's okay to look these things up, but please do your due diligence. And I don't mean due diligence by researching more stuff on YouTube. I mean, doing your due diligence by picking up a book and reading it. There's so much knowledge in books, but it's the one thing we have gotten away from. Nobody wants to read, but everybody wants to Google. Don't get me wrong, Google is great, but you have to get the knowledge for yourself so you can begin to apply it. And that is definitely going to come from reading books, reading. There's so many books out there on basic financials and budgeting. So do go back to the basics. Go back to the basics.
Yeah, and along those same lines, these kids, especially these kids wanting to go to college, it is
Yeah,
unbelievable. And it's even worse than it was when I was in school. These credit cards just throwing these offers. I mean, and how it's legal, I'll never know. I mean,
I
you can't
need
even go to a dang NBA game. You got people at the Pelicans and Grizzlies games trying to give you a free T-shirt if you sign up for a credit card. At
it.
Academy Sports or dealers trying to give you 25% off if you sign up for a credit card today. And these companies are just making a bag off of credit card fees. So and again, credit cards have their place, and they're not necessarily a bad thing. but they
Yeah.
can be a bad thing if they're not utilized correctly and just gotten on whims without any research. So, what are some mistakes that you've seen as far as the credit card game?
Well, personally, me, I fell victim to that. When I went to college, there was credit cards all over, and I didn't think about how I was going to pay them off. So I fell victim to that. So even when I started my family, trying to understand how to correct and fix my credit. And I was like, well, I had like three credit cards when I first went to college. And I'm like, you guys they're giving out credit cards to go and spend to students who don't necessarily have a job. But if you were to go and ask for a $5,000 or $10,000 for a business, then they don't really necessarily give that out. So understanding when it comes to credit card interest, interest, there is simple interest versus compounding interest. These interests on credit cards are sometimes as high as 25 to 30, 35%, 40% because you don't have credit. But then when let's say you have a credit card at 40%, but let's say you have a savings account, you happen to open up a savings account, let's give you 1%. Well, you're still negative 39% in the hole. So when it comes to understanding interest, simple versus compound, your money is growing at simple, but that compounding on those credit cards. So if at all possible, please do not do what I did and go and when you're enrolling in college and get all these credit cards because it will affect you. Also to make it a habit to begin to look at interest rate, whether you are buying a car, 6%, buying a home, 6%, 4%. Interest matter. Either you're going to earn interest or you're going to pay interest. So many of us are upside down when it comes to paying interest because we didn't understand that it's working against us. So making sure that you're paying attention. I mean, 30, 40%, that's ridiculous. That's other ridiculous. And then you have, like I said, how your money is growing. Another thing I want to talk briefly about is when it comes to interest, I know in math, there's always a formula, right? There's always a formula. I love formulas. Math was actually one of my favorite subjects, but there's a formula. I just wish, Greg, I knew this formula when I was in high school. The formula is anything attached to an interest rate, you divide it by 72. 72 is going to tell you how long it's going to take for your money to double. So it's called the rule of 72, developed many, many years ago by Albert Einstein. So anything you get divided by 72, it's going to tell you how fast that balance is going to double and when you should have paid it off before that balance doubles. So rule of 72, look it up, Albert Einstein. It really details you about the rule of compounding interest.
Absolutely. And look, to me, I'm like you. It seems confusing at the time, but there's so many apps now. And again, everybody's on their phones and everybody wants to use TikTok, and that's fine. But there's apps that help you budget. There's apps with all these banks. You know, Cash App's not going to tell you that you're overdrafted. Cash App's not going to tell you your identity's been stolen. So these banks and these apps can do a lot to help you. And you mentioned about the older generation how to distrust the banks. Now these banks want your business. They're going to make it as easy as possible for you to have access to all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. My grandmother definitely did not trust the banks, but now I understand why. I understand that, banks are a lending institution. They're not a savings institution. They're there to lend you money to qualified individuals. But when it comes to saving, you have to position yourself and be open to the knowledge and the resources that's out there available to you. Everything literally is at your fingertips right now. The world is at your fingertips. But while you're searching it on TikTok, making sure you're looking up some, like it says, following some individuals that's giving out financial advice, following some individuals that say, hey, listen, I made this mistake. This is what I'm doing. Because those are the stories and those are the situations and scenarios you need to know so that you don't fall victim to those things as well.
Yeah, and like I mentioned Anthony O'Neill, I'm a huge fan of his, and he's not much older than these kids, and
Yeah,
he really gears his message toward high school kids. And I'm like, look, you want to listen to these rappers? That's great, but listen to Anthony O'Neill too.
I agree. I agree. I mean, he's got it right. I mean, he's got it right. Go and follow some individual. And the beautiful thing now, Greg, is with social media, everything is so easily accessible. You can hashtag, financial high school, basic finances for high school, and you'll come up with a plethora of individuals that you can follow to get that basic information. So understanding, what Greg is doing and outside of the classroom, there's going to be things that you need to do on your own so that you can equip yourself with the knowledge and the skills you need to be financially sound in this day and time. And it's so, so important.
Oh, big time. Now, before I get to their questions, another thing I really want to talk about is you mentioned how you and your husband are entrepreneurs. And I have so many kids tell me, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to be my own boss. And they see the glitz and glamour side of the pictures and, I'm a business owner and I'm doing this, but they don't see the financial side because
Oh,
there's so much financial planning and financial maintaining that needs to go on to opening a business, especially on the front end. There's going to have to be money saved if a bank's going to give you a small business loan. Now it is getting a little bit easier because they have the minority business owner grants, and those are great, and they really need to be there. But still, even to qualify for that, you're going to have to show some credit history. You're going to have to show some bank history, and then also, I think something that's kind of lost on a lot of people is it is a lot more affordable to be a franchise business owner right now, and I don't think that's talked about near enough. So
yeah.
just talk about the financial side of entrepreneurship because everybody sees the fun side, they don't see the money side.
Yeah. Well, entrepreneurship is it sounds fun and being your boss is fun. However, if you are a person that struggle with discipline, if you're a person that struggle with schedules, if you're a person that struggle with budgeting money, if you're a person that struggle with holding your own self accountable, then entrepreneurship is not for you. I'm gonna be honest. When we end entrepreneurship, it's not like clocking in and clocking out and you can do mindless work. Going from a regional nurse executive full time to entrepreneurship full time. My husband was an engineer, going from two, comforting paychecks coming in every 2 weeks to now you have to get up and make it happen. There is no days off. There is no set hours. Oh, I'm only going to work 9 to 5, no weekends, no holidays. Well, you got to work your way to that point. So again, entrepreneurship looks fun, looks easy, but it takes a lot of work. Your calendar is your boss. Again, these skill sets that you're learning in school, organizations, putting systems in place is going to be of the utmost importance when when you're dabbling in entrepreneurship. Budgeting, basic budgeting. There's going to be some days you got to make sure, especially you have a team. Are you making payroll? You got to take your overhead as far as like your office, registering your business, understanding the difference between an LLC and an S corp and C corp, registering your business with the state. There is a lot that goes in upfront. Besides just, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be my own business. Why? Because I want to be my own boss. Well, if you are not, if you are a person that has struggles with accountability, entrepreneurship will be hard for you. Entrepreneurship. And just because you are your own boss does not mean you're not going to have a team and you're the one that's making all the decision. Entrepreneurship means you need to surround yourself with individuals that's smarter than you, that makes more money than you, that has been doing it a little bit longer, so you can get their advice and be able to avoid those potholes and mistakes. So entrepreneurship is great, but listen, it's not always glitz and glamour. There is a lot of downside to it, but you have to be ready for that as well. So
Yeah, and I just see so many kids that actually have a really good idea
yeah.
and actually can execute it very well, but they don't pay any attention to the financials. And look,
Mm.
I know they do in California too. In Mississippi, they're going to take that state sales tax whether you want them to or not.
Oh, yeah.
The IRS is going to take the self-employment tax. So that's things if you're not familiar with, you could be out of business in a great big hurry.
Very, very big. Even like when you're getting your first paycheck, look at it, ask questions, understand what those deductions are, understanding what the Social Security disability, understanding what federal is, understanding what the state taxes is, and understanding where you are as far as your range and how that affects you and your percentage. Don't just have the check direct deposit and you never look at your bank, your check stub. Look at it and understand what FICA means, understanding what these things are because they're so important. Don't just get the money and spend it. Look at your check stub, even if it's direct deposit. Log on to your account. Look at your actual pay stub. It's so, so important. A lot of people, Greg, because everything is automated now and direct deposit, they don't necessarily actually look at their pay stub. And businesses make mistakes too. So,
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that here in the coming weeks in this class. And this is 100% true. And it wasn't on purpose, it wasn't intentional, but I actually looked at my pay stub like you're supposed to, and there was a big mistake on my paycheck last year. Now they
oh,
fixed it, but I had to go in and say, "Look, this isn't right." And then, we're so sorry. But that's things that happen. People need to know if they're that could have been really that could have been really bad. So And if they pay you, and also you need to know if they pay you too much, they're going to ask for that money back. So
You
knowing
exactly.
things like that, knowing your pay rate. So that's extremely important. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Very, very, very important. Same thing with me. So again, I know that, we are in the series in the time of technology, but there's some things you may not need to sit down and do your balancing of your checkbook, but you still need to have paper thing. One thing that I always have paper, like I don't really need my certain like bills and things like that, but my pay stub, my transactions, my bank statements, I need those on paper. I look for those bank statements every single month. I do not automate those. I do not go paperless. I do not elect into paperless because I need to see it. I need to see it. So it's very, very important.
Absolutely. Well, I do have some good questions from the students here, and these are great. I'm glad they're thinking about this stuff. This
Good.
first one is Levi Johnson. He's in 10th grade, and he asked, I want to buy my first car. So, what would be an acceptable interest rate if I was going to finance it?
Well, then that is a loaded question. So if you are going to finance it, meaning that you probably won't be in a position to be able to finance it because you don't have any credit. So your mother or your parents or someone would have to co-sign for you. Now, let me talk about that. So when your parents are co-signing for you, which ultimately means if you do not make the payment, if you're not working, then your parents is ultimately responsible for it. It's no different than when you're going to college and those parent plus loans. If you drop out or whatever, your parents are left with the debt of having to pay off that loan. So an acceptable interest rate, it depends because you don't really have established credit. It depends on what your co-signer's credit is as to what the interest rate is going to be. Just know the higher the interest rate, the bigger the risk that the bank is taking on you. The lower the interest rate, the less risk, which means that your credit score is really good. So the higher, the greater risk, the lower, that means you're really good at keeping your debt to income ratio low.
Yeah, and again, and you mentioned 6%. I would think for an 18, 19-year-old, and it varies from state to state, but I would say anything over 9% would be too much.
Too much. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I like this one. This is Cortez Maxwell. He's in 10th grade. And he asked, oh, but I want to preface this with I have kids all the time also say, I want to move to XYZ big city. I want to
Oh,
live in Miami. I want to live in Atlanta. And I'm like, that's cool, but big city living has big city bills. So he asked, how has moving to California changed your financial decisions from when you lived in Mississippi?
oh, awesome. So I moved to California for better pay and also better opportunities. And I got both of those things. I literally tripled my income moving to California. However, I also tripled the taxes in which I was paying. So coming here, the minimum, if you're in the Bay Area, if you make less than $150,000 a year, it's pretty much poverty. A one bedroom apartment in San Francisco is going to run about $4,500 a month. So moving to the big city, so I moved here, so which is again what made me realize I can't keep changing states, chasing higher pay if I don't understand how to make my money work for me. So I'm like, I'm making more, but why do I not see more? There's why do I not have excess of income? So I really had to understand that wherever you move, you may think I want to move here because I'm making 20 bucks an hour over here. They're going to offer me 30, 10 more dollars an hour. But you got to also look at the cost of living. The cost of living here, I mean, just taxes alone, if it's 50%. Federal taxes is 30, state is 20%. So if you're making $10,000 a month, you're only bringing home five. And imagine if you had a $3,000 rent. So you're only, living off $2,000. So moving from Mississippi, simple living, simple life. I love it. That's why as soon as my youngest graduates, I'm headed back to the South. I'm headed back to be closer to where I can actually see my money and money can go further. So definitely take all of that into consideration.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned. I have a friend in Oakland. Her and her wife both have a combined income. I don't. It's just six figures. I don't want to put their business out there too much, but they have to have roommates living
Yeah.
in Oakland. Now, and they're not broke or anything. They have good jobs, but like you said, it's $4,500 just for a one bedroom. So they do what they need to do. They've made some good decisions about living with people and renting out rooms and things. But that is something in these big cities that almost has to happen unless you're in the quarter million range.
It's the norm. It's absolutely, and even if you are in quarter million range, you still have to have it. Again, you're never going to be able to make any amount of money to where budgeting is not on your mind. Like, don't think, oh, well, I have make so much money, I don't need to worry about it. Even if you do reach that status of you have so much money, you still need to be paying attention to your finances. Even celebrity, that's how they get into issue with back tax and things like that because their financial person that they trust is not managing. So never get to the point, no matter how successful you are, to where you're completely hands off and looking and managing your finances. Have quarterly meetings with them, something.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's any soccer fans, but Lionel Messi went he was about to go to prison in Argentina, and he's the highest paid soccer player on the planet because he owed so much money to the Argentine government, and he's still having to play soccer into his 40s because he's having to pay all that stuff off. So that's a great example of just because you're famous doesn't mean you got your money together.
Exactly. It happens all the time, all the time.
I love this question. This is Edward Flowers. He's in 10th grade, member of our band here at Velma Jackson. And he asked, when I turn 18, I want to start investing and manage a portfolio. So as I go through high school, what would be the best way to balance my schoolwork, my personal bank account, and my portfolio to make sure all are successful?
Oh, that's a very good question, Edward. Good job. So 18 is amazing age to start. Balancing schoolwork, and all of the here's my ratio. Here's what I told my kids. Number one, you want to live off 50% of your income. So if you're working, you want to live off 50%. The 50% of your income is what you live off of. The other 30, what I tell them, the other, of course, 10% tithing if you do that. And then 30% save, 30% is save. And then the other, well, the 10%, the 10% should be like, kind of whatever you want to do. But you should get in the habit of living off at least 10% of your income. Not 10%, I'm sorry, 50%. Sorry, I had a call coming in, distraction. At least 50% of your income and begin to save the other. So investing at 18, starting at 18, making sure that you, again, create your bank account. That's the first thing. Here's a funny story. When I was 16, I started working and I still had my same bank account at Merchants and Farmers. I don't even know if they're still there, but
Oh,
I still had my same bank account even when I applied for my first home to purchase. And that long history at 16, when we purchased our first home at 22, I still have the same bank account number. Even
wow.
when I was here, I still had it, but I think it changed to Renaissance or something. It changed, but I
Yep.
still have the exact same bank account. So making sure that you start your bank account early and keep it. So important.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and even if it's not a whole lot of money in there, but having an account for a long time really looks good on their credit reports.
Yes, it does. It
I've just got
does.
one more. This is Shania Smith. She's in 10th grade, one of our volleyball players here. And she asked, what do you enjoy best about your career?
I absolutely love helping people. Going into nursing, I became a nurse because I wanted to help people. And I never thought I would find anything that allowed me the ability to be able to help people and found satisfy my heart the way the nursing did. But it got to the point in nursing that I began to see myself, my reality. And in some point, you're all going to face your reality. Is if you choose at that moment to turn a deaf ear and ignore it. So my reality, I worked in critical care majority of my career, and then I managed critical care. My reality was taking care of patients in their 20s and 30s when I was in my late 30s or early 40s. And I began to see what the lack of financial planning did for them. They made good money, but they did not have the financial means and the safety net to be able to take care of, support themselves. So I began to see myself. I said, well, what if sickness happens to you? What if you were to get sick? How long would your family be able to survive? What if you can't get up and go to work? Your degrees look great, but you can't will those degrees to your children. You need to spend time investing into something that you can will to your children. So I now being in finances, there is just like in healthcare and nursing, people were physically sick. Right now, the illness is financial literacy. People are financially illiterate in so many reasons, and that's not a bad word. That just means that schools, and I appreciate you so much, Greg, for doing this, is because not enough school systems is even talking about this. I wish I knew what I knew now back when I was in high school. The mistakes I made, I would have been so much further in life. But it is our mission, our goals, because we have lived that experience, Greg and myself. We want to teach you early what we learn late. So now what I love is I still am able to help people, but I'm meeting them in their most vulnerable state, meaning that they're in their 60s or in their 70s and they're looking back over their lives and realize they have more years behind them than they do ahead of them. But still being able to give them hope to say all hope is not lost, and being able to give them resources and being able to put plans together, supplementing, their retirement if they didn't save enough, creating personal private pensions plans for them, and seeing that light go off and the still feeling like my life is not over. I can still take that trip that I want. So it still bring me joy because I'm still helping people and at their most vulnerable state. And I still get to satisfy my heart, which is helping people. But individuals still need a lot of help. And I absolutely love what I do.
Absolutely. Well, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. And please give Jezreel my best.
I,
I know you guys do a great job out there. But before we go, just a couple things. First of all, we mentioned about following good people on social media. You're a great social media follower. Tonza Christian CEO at Instagram.
yeah, that's right. That's my Instagram handle.
Yeah, and it's Tonza underscore Christian
Underscore.
underscore CEO at Instagram. Now, and before we go, the last thing, we mentioned several times about lack of access, lack of resources in the rural communities, especially rural Black communities, for so long. And these kids may be like, "Look, this stuff is stupid. It's never going to apply to me. I don't understand it." But how important is it at 15, 16, 17, 18 years old to start at least being familiar with these terms and these concepts as they move on through high school, because it is going to be needed.
It is very important. For me, having this financial literacy and financial education, and for yourself, your parents cannot teach you past what they didn't know. You are learning this. We did not learn this. So this information has been, and this information for me and for you that you've learned today, you should go back and start having conversation with your parents and helping them, because this information and knowledge will help you reach forward, but it's also going to help you reach back because they didn't know this information. So I know, it was, quick today, but it's going to be very important that you understand and begin to have conversations. And now, granted, if your parents are anything like my mom and my dad, they were not very open to you telling them what to do. So your approach is also very important. So don't go off saying, "Oh, I know this, and this is why you're doing this wrong." No, 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 no. So making sure that, but you begin having the conversations, and I promise you, they're going to appreciate it. So more, you have access to more. You have more access to the things that they did. So reach forward and also reach back and help your parents and individuals around you.
Absolutely, man. Again, we thank you so much. I learn something every time you talk. It's just unbelievable all the great work you're doing out there. Tonza Christian, all the way from the San Francisco Bay, Northern California. Thank you so much for getting up early and joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
I talk to you soon, buddy.
Thank you. Uh-huh. Bye-bye.